This episode of Live at the Blue Box has been brought to you by Tweaked Audio.
To get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com.
Welcome to Live at the Blue Box. It is now time for a special Input Junkie interview. We call these Input Junkie satellites. You know, we change the name of all this stuff all the time. So here's the deal. First of all, I'm Rob Southgate. This is Chris Mao.
I'm Chris Mao, yeah.
And between us is Phil. No, wait. I haven't met Phil.
You have not.
Phillip, okay. I don't know anything about this. Chris texted me and said, I've got a podcaster who's into music and all that. You're going to love to talk to him. We're going to interview. So, hi.
Hello.
Hi, this is Rob. So,
Yeah.
Philip, this is...
So I'm Dr. Phillip Serna. I teach double bass and violas da gamba at Valparaiso University. And for a long time, I had a long-running podcast on the music of Doctor Who called Adventures in Time, Space, and Music. And it was probably one of the anniversaries of September 11th, and I was listening to, maybe it was an interview on Radio Free Scaro about, they were interviewing Murray Gold, and I'm like, I'm not really getting as much out of this interview as I'd like, and then I'm like, well, that means you have to start a podcast about it.
Sounds familiar.
And I remember the first time I got to interview Doctor Who composer, at the very end, I'm like, okay, the recording stopped, and now I need just 5 minutes to completely have hero worship moment, But, Doctor Who's got such a rich history, and how much it's changed since year one in '63 is that of course many fans know Doctor Who through Murray Gold and the new series, and many fans who grew up, like of course you're wearing your classic Who
Yes.
shirt, grew up watching Doctor Who on PBS, and that's where
Sure.
I kind of came upon it, and I was amazed by how diverse all of the music in Doctor Who is, and there's always a lot of weird little anomalies along the way, but it's probably one of the most creative television shows on television.
Well, and consistently for so long.
Sure.
When you talk about the music is a big draw for me. And I come from a musical household. My dad, right there, was an avant-garde jazz musician.
Very
so, yeah, my whole childhood sounded like this because he was a drummer. Every show I watched, I thought Doctor Who had a soundtrack that went like this because my dad practiced all the time.
Very cool.
But, it's a big draw. And Doctor Who, that's one of the things that drew me in. And, I've used that with my daughter, too.
Sure.
I had them watch Doctor Who at the Palms. Have you seen that?
Oh, yes.
Oh, my gosh. The special is so great. Why they don't show it every year, I don't know. But
Right.
but it was wonderful. And that, watching it with my daughter, I watched how the music drew her in, the excitement and everything, and the orchestration, the whole thing. And I got to talk about, the symphony versus the orchestra and all that with her. It's like there's so much you can do with the music.
Right, and you look through even the history of the new show is in the first season when Murray Gold is mostly using samples and electronics, and then the soundtracks get very, very large and orchestral with the BBC Symphony of Wales, and then since we have it on in the background, we're Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone from Series 5, is you get a great presence of electronic music in Doctor Who again,
Right.
which is something that goes back to the very beginning, even to the theme tune when Delia Derbyshire arranged Ron Grainer's theme using nothing but tape loops, all analog.
Boy, you are a music geek.
Yes.
Well,
He lost me at a long time ago, but it's good.
Well, the funny thing is you look at how progressive Doctor Who is now. We have some great directors like Rachel Talalay in the most recent two seasons. You've got more women writers contributing to the show. But you really only have two women who ever contributed to the show as composers. One was Delia Derbyshire, who did the main theme, and I think some of her music was used in Inferno in 1970. And then Elizabeth Parker, who worked with the Radiophonic Workshop, and that was Time Lash in 1985-86, which of course is not a well-loved story. But it's neat because you have phases where all the way before Series 7 of the original show, they'd have to, the composers would meet with the directors, talk about what they wanted the music to do in the show, record it before they filmed and pipe it into the studio live. So you don't actually get music being done in post-production until
Oh, wow.
John
Really?
Pertwee's second season. Yeah.
Really?
It's all done beforehand.
Now, that's really interesting.
Which is why when you get things like the Silurians by Carrie Blyton that has crumb horns and other exotic early music instruments, it's not a very loved story for its music, but you sit there and go, well, it doesn't seem to fit the style of the visuals. I'm like, of course, because they didn't know what it was because they hadn't filmed them yet.
Right. They're creating the music. They're putting the
I did not know
the
that
cart
that's what
before the
happened,
horse.
so-
That's really interesting.
It sounds very BBC-like, though, because they probably, had at the time we're going to do the music and then recorded it all in one shot and then did the episodes
Right.
probably.
Well, even so, you have Dudley Simpson writes his first score for Doctor Who with Planet of Giants, and then becomes kind of the main composer of Doctor Who from mid-Pertwee
To
almost
Baker, all of Baker, right?
except for the last season, season 18 with the burgundy scarf. Woohoo! It's funny because when they get to Series 18 and John Nathan Turner takes over, he's like, well, Dudley Simpson had kind of fallen out with the Radiophonic Workshop because he would use session musicians to record the music, and then he would fill it out with electronic sounds from the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, right? And then the last season that he wrote, which is a great score, is City of Death from Series 17, which his last season working on the show is he didn't have as much access to the Radiophonic Workshop, and when John Nathan Turner took over, he wanted the Radiophonic Workshop to do the music exclusively. And so you start to have a lot more composers working on the show.
Interesting. Now, are there other, outside of Doctor Who, I'm going to guess you're a music geek in general, are there other shows that you would say are comparable in this, that are using full orchestration or that have done this type of thing? Like, I know that it used to be that, like, CBS had the CBS Orchestra, and they would have... but it seems like now you don't get as much of that. It feels very much like electronic to me, whereas Doctor Who, I hear both.
Right. Well, what happens
is that still happening in other areas?
It happens a great deal because a lot of composers who work in film will use massive sample libraries because often, depending on how much budget they have, they might not have a budget for a full symphony.
Okay.
So very often what happens in the video game industry now is you'll have most of it will be done with sample libraries.
Oh, really? I didn't realize
and
that.
And then they'll have a few real live humans playing in order to make it sound more human.
Right.
And but that's usually because of budgetary constraints. Like even when you look at Series 4 of Doctor Who, when you get all the big famous master music, not in Series 4, in Series 3, sorry, that you have the full orchestra.
You want to write down?
often
He got a
samples.
mistake on that one. You want to mark that? Good. Okay.
It's been thorough.
It's been thoroughly documented.
But like the Ben Foster does all the orchestrations for Murray Gold, and so they record, and they have a very limited number of days. So the first sessions for Series 5, which is playing around us, were recorded at the same time as they were doing the sessions for The End of Time.
Oh,
so they only
okay.
usually end up getting a couple days to record with the orchestra, and then they have to end up doing most of the work in
With
post.
samples and posts and all that.
Right, which is why you get a lot of music. Like Series 5 has got a great score, but how many times do you hear the same cue of I Am the Doctor throughout that season?
Yeah, a lot.
Right, and sometimes it's with every orchestral element that they recorded for it, and sometimes it's pared down to fewer elements, but it's the same group of loops that they recorded.
Interesting. Yeah, I've wondered about that, especially when you mentioned that particular piece of music.
Yeah.
I've wondered how many different ways they recorded, if they just removed tracks or what they did. But it sounds like the budgetary constraints would make it so that they really did orchestrate it out and then pull tracks to make different arrangements.
Well, and if you think about it,
That's
it's
interesting.
like being able to do things on a small budget is kind of what Doctor Who's been about since the beginning, right?
You think?
Well, was it
Exactly.
cheaper in the beginning to pay musicians to come in and play that were already on the payroll?
Right, they
to
would've
get the
had
sound where they didn't have the money for science. They didn't have the money for special effects. But we have these musicians and they're going to play, so they might as well play.
It was usually story by story, and if you go onto the BBC's official site, they have they have PDFs of like the official documentation of the original episodes. And so in certain stories, we know every session musician who played on the story, and for the vast majority of them, we don't know at all.
Right.
So like for composers like Tristram Cary, who wrote a really stunning electronic music score for the original Dalek 7 part.
Right.
is that music was all done at the Radiophonic Workshop, and what's funny, Tristram Carey retired, to be a serious art composer in Australia. And it's very funny. Mark Ayers, who archived a lot of the Radiophonic Workshop stuff and did all the CD releases of the classic music, would comment that he would go to interview him and be like, oh, that was just my TV stuff. It's not important. But it's like, well, no, there's a lot of people very interested in it.
Sure.
And the amount of enthusiasm for people with the music of Doctor Who, and what's sad is, like, for the majority of the Baker run, there's not session tapes for Dudley Simpson's music. You could only enjoy the music in watching the story.
In the story.
Right, which is painful when you look at stories like Pyramids of Mars, which is iconic, Deadly Assassin.
So the only way you can hear it, they don't have soundtracks for this.
No.
Right.
That was actually going to be the question. Do they put these out as soundtracks for each episode? I mean, how are you able to access these?
Well, what happened is Mark Ayers, when the Radiophonic Workshop closed in the 90s, members of the workshop went to Mark Ayers, go, hey, you liked working with us, with, there's all this stuff here. And he said that as he was going through the Maida Vale studios of the BBC, that they found a good portion of the surviving archive of tapes being put into a skip, a big, for us, a dumpster.
Yeah.
American terminology, to be destroyed, but he was able to find it.
Wow.
And over the years, as they've done the DVD range, so they've been able to see, it's like, okay, we might have one episode's worth of music here, and I think, was it a couple years ago, they put out for the 50th a whole retrospective soundtrack of all the Doctors, and that's the first time that, say, music from the Sontaran Experiment has turned up in a CD release, because there's just one episode of that two-parter that the music survives.
Well, I don't even think, I think the interesting history of Doctor Who is BBC didn't even take it seriously, even though it's their longest running show in the early 70s, because they recorded over tapes because they just didn't think they would need to save them.
Well, that's
they
like
didn't even see that
the
stuff.
animation world, where
Right.
they just scrubbed the acetate clean because they were like, well, this isn't worth anything. And it's like, wait a minute. That's an artist touched that and created this. So
And
it's a similar mindset.
Well, it was in a culture in the 70s, because it was the late 70s when they were starting to have a BBC archive, and they started to realize that master tapes did not exist anymore. Ian Levine, who saved many of the early stories, was trying to find out, like, what state of things were, and he got there to the BBC, and it's like, oh, the original 7-part master tapes for the Daleks are sitting marked for destruction, and he said,
Wow.
Well, they did. I mean,
Yeah.
There was it a couple of years ago where they found something in Uganda, like at a TV station that was locked in some closet. Here's
Web of
8
Fear
episodes.
and The Enemy of the World.
Yeah, and they were gone. And there's what is it, like 28 episodes, like 28 story arcs or something that's missing, I can't think of the number.
It's now just under 100 episodes that are still missing. And there were some interviews with the gentleman who rescued those particular tapes, because his company goes to, places in really difficult places to get to in the world, like in Central Africa, and say, we can digitize and go through and preserve your archives of your, film and television collection, which for historical archiving purposes, if you could open them up, because sometimes, if there was a tape, they made 16 millimeter films of Doctor Who episodes and sent them, say, to Uganda, but then they'd be like, okay, you're not going to be watching. There's not going to be another place this is going to go to, so that you're supposed to destroy it. And sometimes they wouldn't follow those orders to destroy it, because they might end up in someone's personal collection.
Sure.
Right. And the really beautiful thing about classic Doctor Who is, as we know, fandoms have a tendency to be insane. And so
Not Doctor Who.
Wait a minute. How dare you?
Well, this is the pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Many times over.
So for us now, we can just say, okay, we can DVR a TV show.
Sure.
Or back when there was the VHS days and beta days, you could record onto a tape. Well, people in the 60s would hack into the electronics in the back of a tube television. Kind of dangerous. You can get electrocuted. Yes. And they would record episodes, audio, as they aired.
Right.
So every Doctor Who story survives, at least in some format.
Didn't they take the audios and then apply production stills from it, right? Isn't that what they're
I've
doing
seen
with
some of that stuff out there.
Right.
Sure.
For the Web of Fear being one of the Troughton stories that got returned, It was believed that episode 3, which is the story that introduces Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, was that they actually had a reel, and of course they were trying to negotiate to get it back for the BBC.
Right.
And because someone at that station in Africa got wind of that, it got quietly removed to someone's personal collection, possibly never to be seen again.
Right.
So that's why when that DVD, well, first it was the iTunes release and the DVD release, is that everything for Web of Fear and Enemy of the World were complete except for episode 3 of Web of Fear. So they did those telesnaps, which were photographs of the episodes.
Right. Yeah, there's actually, see, I didn't follow it as much with Doctor Who. I mean, everything you're saying matches up to film archiving. Right. And I've studied some of that. I mentioned in an earlier interview that I was part of the Ice Pack, and that was one of the things that would always talk about with indie film, was trying to salvage indie film that was, these guys shot on 16 millimeter. There were 2 copies. And it's like, whoa, what are we going to do? How are we going to save this stuff? And the preservation there. There's a horror film that it was a Lon Chaney film, and we've all seen the image of this like ghoul that Lon Chaney played, but no one had seen the film in years. And a few years ago, they found the first reel of the 2 reels. It was a 2-reeler, and you can see it now. And it's, I guess that I only saw the first part of it, but I guess they did the same thing. They took stills to make up the last half because somehow they had salvaged audio off of something somebody recorded off a TV station.
Right, like what's neat with the 2 Entertain / BBC Worldwide DVD range is that whenever they've done a DVD release, they'd have to go back and restore and carefully fix the video, and then Mark Ayers will do that for the audio. And the earliest story, which was Series 18, one of my favorites, The Leisure Hive, scored by Peter Howell, excellent story. Is the first or the earliest story in the DVD range that has a 5.1 surround sound mix, because Ian Levine had certain master audio tapes in his collection.
And he was able to
split it. And
Yeah, the big rumor when they found that one a couple of years ago, I was reading an article about it, and they were saying, you're talking about all the African, how they found stuff in Africa, and one of the archivers said, we just keep praying that we're going to go to, somebody in Japan is going to find a locker full of these, because they know somewhere they go, Japan has so many pockets of people that are just avid collectors of everything.
Right.
And it's kind of like, do you remember when the Honeymooners tapes surfaced?
Right.
And it was like those were lost forever. We knew those same, 30 episodes. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew those same 32 episodes. Then someone found them. And it was like, this is everything else. I mean, it's pretty amazing, and I really hope that someday we do get to see the rest of that. That would be really cool.
Right. Well, and it also depends on source material, because I think the BBC has released the 1996 television movie a couple of times. They did a special edition release, but a number of years ago,
but was it BBC or was it Canadian Broadcasting that put those out? I know the BBC did, but
BBC did, because those are 2 Entertain.
Right.
They put out with their revisitation sets in the UK, and they put them out as individual stories in the US later. One of the reasons why the TV movie never came out as an official release for a long time is you had rights between Universal and Fox.
Right.
And
there were a lot of fingers in that pie.
Right.
Right. And once Doctor Who reached a level of popularity in the States, that they're like, okay, we'd like a piece of that pie, and we can probably be a little bit more flexible on the rights on it. Is that there was a fire a number of years ago in the archives at Universal.
Right.
And so Universal sees it as too much trouble to see if they can go back through what's left of their archive to see if they're the master reels of the special effects or the footage from that episode.
Right.
Because if you think about it, it's late enough that they could do an HD release of that story, but they don't have access to that material. But you go back to like 1970 with Spearhead from Space, and the only one completely shot in film, and we have an HD release of that now, which is great.
Yeah, they're the technology and that stuff it's wonderful that they can get that out, that they can do whatever. I mean, who would have thought when we were watching Tom Baker and it being campy as we're as kids watching it, looking at this, going, this is a great show and we're way into it, but it was really campy back in the day. I mean, it was a very, I don't want to say suspect, but it just had that charm. Although the stories were great, it had that charm to where it is now. Right. Even when they came back with Eccleston, you're just like, this is legit. I mean,
Yeah,
Our
it's
show
very
is back.
true.
Right,
The
yeah.
show is back, and not only is it back, it's serious. I mean, even though
Well,
they didn't think it was going to go past. I mean, Russell T Davies is like, we might get a couple of seasons out of this, and then all of a sudden it's like, it's huge. And
Huge.
Now it's up for an Emmy because of certain rights. We didn't talk about that in This Week in Geek, but there are two.
Yeah, Peter Capaldi is nominated.
Peter Capaldi
Best
for
Actor.
Hellbent has been nominated for an Emmy. He's one of.
Oh, I didn't hear this.
He's in the preliminaries. It's not the finals. It's like the first round of like they nominated.
Right.
It's like of 150 shows, but Hellbent as a show and then him acting in that episode are
Really?
up for an Emmy because it's funded. They said it had something to do with funding and that there was American funding for the show because of BBC America. It actually
Right.
qualifies.
So is
for
this the
Emmys.
first time it's up for an Emmy in any way?
Yeah, it's been up for
Interesting.
BAFTAs, but it has never been up for an Emmy because
Right.
Emmys are obviously here in America.
right.
So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because I know that speaking of awards and that, they're Canadian. The Jupiter Award is the Canadian one, and there are certain shows that we see here that we think they never show up on Emmys, but it's because they are entirely funded. They're entirely Canadian shows,
Right.
Right.
And they win Jupiter Awards, but here nobody knows what that is.
Sure.
Right. Right.
BAFTA we've heard of.
Yeah,
but-
well, but they're
still
that's
there's-
the English Emmys, right?
there's
Or,
a-
this BAFTA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there-
So I mean,
there's a swag to having an
and
Emmy,
there's
or at least to
different-
Americans.
And there's different types of BAFTAs because the BAFTA Cymru's are the Welsh BAFTAs, and so Doctor Who, of course, because it's produced in Wales, gets many of those technical awards all the time.
right. Well, and it's a
Right.
great show, and it's always gotten. I mean, they've won many times for a lot of the supporting actresses have won BAFTAs and actors in the series. The doctors have not as much.
Right.
Just from memory, just because either they're too popular or they go in other, they'll do the Downton Abbeys or they'll do the other
Right.
shows that they have. I mean, they have unbelievable TV, and we've talked about that before. But
Yes, we have.
it's kind of amazing that it's up here. They probably won't win because of all of the other shows that are out, but I mean, it's kind of cool that Capaldi is up for one.
Well, and if you look at the TV movie, John Debney, who did the score, one of the composers who did the main
Sure.
composer, did the score, did Elf, and of course, everyone in the United States has seen Elf probably
Right.
too many times at the holidays, right?
Sure.
We love Elf, but anyway. But you look at one thing that is very funny, and I wish when they did the DVD extras they would have interviewed him. We know Tony Dow as the brother on Leave It to Beaver, right?
Right.
Of course.
He supervised all the special effects for the TV movie.
Did he really?
Yeah, isn't that just
I didn't know that.
People rail on the TV movie. The TV movie stands up, and it's more than okay. It's pretty good.
Yeah,
I think it's a pretty good story.
It's got issues, but yeah, I was a big fan.
And I hate to say it has Fox issues, but it has early Fox issues.
it
where
does.
They,
That's where it's
they kind of lost
crippled.
it. They Americanized it
Right.
a little bit too much. Where like I think Matt Smith is much more of an American version
Yes.
of Doctor Who than that ever was.
Right.
But it was too much too soon in the '90s where they didn't really tie it together, and I'm going to go into the Eye of Harmony and all that. They tried to make it an American superhero movie, and it was not
Right.
at that time ready
Right.
for that.
Well, and the amazing thing is you'd be amazed how much fandom we've ignored the Doctor's half human. Oh, there's a Mr. Spock element.
Right.
And of course, it plays into the two-parter that ends the season. The
Right.
hybrid
Yes.
it's hinted the Doctor's half human. Now they didn't go all the way because it's like, oh, it's the Doctor and Clara are the hybrid together.
Right.
But keeping it ambiguous, but like harkening back to a big
that was-
moment of fan controversy.
That was Moffat, I think.
Yeah.
Doing a little dig, kind of
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like, oh,
Right.
we're going to go back to that because that is a topic. I mean,
Well,
when you talk about that.
that's also in the last few years how they've made a big deal about the McGann thing being canon, and even
Sure.
the big audio stuff being canon.
Right.
And,
Well-
and that stuff, like he's playing with that.
Well, the neat thing is another connection from the TV movie is the scriptwriter. His dad was one of the actors in the 1960s story, The Gunfighters. And so as a little kid, he's on set watching
Right.
them make Doctor Who.
That's cool.
And then he got to make Doctor
Wow.
Who
Yeah.
decades later.
Well, it started
Wow.
with Davison, where Davison was the first fan of Doctor Who to actually play the Doctor, and then you get into there. I mean, look at Capaldi.
Capaldi
wanted to
sending
start a fan club. I mean,
Yeah,
that
sending
is amazing.
the
And
letter
even
in and
Tennant.
everything.
I mean, Tennant was a huge fan.
Wait, he
Matt Smith
he
never saw
married
the
his
show.
doctor's
Well,
daughter. He was such
did.
a big fan.
That gets but talk about complicated. So, so the 10th Doctor has the Doctor's daughter, who is the daughter of the 5th Doctor, and they get married. You think that maybe one of their offspring will be a future Doctor?
I don't know.
It could be possible.
But have you seen the clip
could
where
be.
they go, "Who's your favorite Doctor?" and they say the girl says Tom Baker. Like their oldest daughter goes, Tom Baker's my favorite. They're like, what about Grandpa and Daddy? She's like, I like Tom Baker. It's kind of funny. It's really cute, because George, she asked her, it's like, who's your favorite doctor when they were doing the 50th? And she's like, oh, Tom Baker. So and then they
and you were mentioning the audios, and for a long time, like the novels and the audios were, some people consider them a higher level of non-canon than the novels because they had the real actors playing the doctors. And because Moffat has been big supporter of Big Finish,
Sure.
I mean, now you've got 10th Doctor audios coming out.
Oh, yeah.
And Tom Baker.
You got War Doctor audios coming out.
Well, and then they got Aiden Rivers' song. They got McCann and Alex Kingston. I remember when we talked about her when we met her. It's just like she's like, oh, it's fantastic because I met her at TARDIS last year.
Yeah, and
they were both great about it.
Those stories are great, and I think since Nick Briggs took over from Gary Russell, took over Big Finish, they've been going, okay, what's bigger, bolder, and crazier that we can try to do? And of course, it's like years of negotiation. But they got Tom Baker back. I remember when I listened to his first audio, and I got going along going, oh my God, like I haven't, like I remember as a kid watching Legopolis for the first time, and I had the program guide. I read the plots ahead before it came on PBS. I knew, okay, this is the 4th Doctor's last story, and he's laying there dying, and you're like, oh my God, he's gone. Yeah. And then he's back, and then he's in the 50th.
That I went crazy. I mean, I heard his voice, and I like literally was like weeping. My wife like, what's wrong? I'm like, but that's. There was no hint of that at all.
When the 50th aired, we had it DVR'd at home. Mm-hmm. I was doing bass gigs down in Springfield, but I didn't want to get spoiled, so I get a not so legal copy on my phone. I'm watching it in the back of my car, but before the gig, 'cause I'm like, I didn't want to go online and get spoiled, so I want to know what happened.
Sure.
And then I got to go see it in the theater a few days later, and when seeing it in the theater was great because when that moment of you hear, Tom Baker go, maybe you just might.
Yeah. Oh.
And the whole audience just like dead silence. Like, oh my God.
We actually saw it when they debuted it at the theater. So we saw it before it. And my wife loves to talk about this experience because it was such love in that theater. Oh. It was packed to the gills. And like when Tom Baker came out, like everybody, you could tell everyone had chills. There were tears coming down people's faces. It was like, this is crazy.
Right, because all you had was a
You didn't have that even in episode 7. You had, for Doctor Who, more emotional reaction.
Sure. Well, you had 4 doctors in one episode. And it was just amazing. I mean,
and then at least visual cameos of the rest.
Right. Oh yeah, and it was was
even the angry eyebrows.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So okay, as long as we're talking about that, Osgood. Who do you think Osgood is? Why is she wearing the scarf? Why is she there with Tom Baker? Why is she so in the know?
Well, looking back at like Planet of the Dead, there was the one scientific advisor who was a really big fan of the Doctor, speaking out a great deal. And she seemed like the next fan level of that, because when in the Zygon 2-parter last year, when the other Osgood shows up at the very end of the story,
but
first Osgood is wearing Peter Davison style clothes, and then the other Osgood shows up wearing Sylvester McCoy, like his last season. And so you're sitting there going, well, they obviously love the Doctor down at Unit. And probably they should.
But in the first part, and that was before any of that happened, and the Zygon captured and hit her and took over her persona. Right. She said, you were always jealous of your sister, which started the rumor mills thinking that maybe she's the Doctor's another clone daughter of the Doctor.
I held firm to that. I've watched that scene so many times, and it says something about the pretty one. Oh, you're not the pretty one, or something like that. And every time I see this, I'm like, they're referring to the Doctor's daughter. I think she's Tom Baker's daughter in that.
Well, she'd be Tennant's daughter, because Tennant's the one who had
Yeah, but Baker, why is Baker there? Couldn't Baker have...
No, because they explain that because he says, I could be the curator here one day. And he goes, of course you could be. So that is him. That's him fulfilling the prophecy of him being the curator.
Oh, okay.
Because he has been the curator since Queen Elizabeth of that archive.
So he's a future Doctor who is kind of going back and revisiting old favorites.
Well, he says revisiting the faces because that sets the precedence.
So that would make Osgood Tennant's daughter.
Tennant's daughter, because if you take it from being Georgia Moffat's
and then he
sister,
chose a face he was comfortable with, which was Tom Baker's.
Well, they set that precedent with Colin Baker, with
Martha Jones.
Martha Jones with Peter Capaldi, that you could regenerate into something. Even Romana does that, because the first Romana regenerates into Lala Ward and saw her face before, because she was the sixth key to time. So it's Astra, right? Is that her name?
Yeah, Princess Astra.
Princess Astra.
And even more fan geekery. So Lala Ward was, of course, for a short 6 months married to Tom Baker, and then of course got divorced and married. And who's the big evolutionary scientist in the UK? I'm gonna lose my fan card on this. Who actually had a cameo in Doctor Who?
I'm blanking.
Richard Dawkins.
Yes.
Richard Dawkins. And so
I completely drew a blank on that.
yeah. So Richard Dawkins, the scientist, was also friends with Douglas Adams. So of course Lala Ward and Dawkins were friends with Douglas Adams. Douglas Adams being, in Stephen Moffat's words, the greatest writer that Doctor Who's ever had.
Right.
Or it's like he provided for Doctor Who the one thing that was completely useless. What would Doctor Who be if it was written by a genius?
Yes.
Right? And so...
he's written a couple of decent books.
Yeah, just a couple.
Right. Well,
He's okay.
Have you guys seen the DVD extras on City of Death?
No.
Oh, it's done... The documentary is done in the style of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide.
Right.
It is really hilarious. Highly recommended. And
I'll have to check that out.
And mentioning the DVD range, so whenever there are tapes that they do have music for stories, they would have them as isolated scores on the DVD.
Nice.
Oh, okay. That's what I was asking about.
So you could watch.
But that's not all of it. It's just the ones that they have the
right.
to do.
But that's great. I mean, just to seek those out would be
well
worth it.
One box set that is kind of an exception is Trial of a Time Lord, because the first and last stories are Dominic Glenn,
right?
And his tapes exist because it's a period in which they went from having, you had Dudley and his session musicians, then you had radiophonic workshop composers, then you had independently contracted composers till the end of the show, right? So you had the first and last story of Trial of a Time Lord was Dominic Glenn, and he has his master tapes. Chair of the Vervoids, which is probably not a great score or a fabulous story either, they have the master tapes for that. But Mind Warp, the guy who did the music for Mind Warp, whose name I'm blanking on, who worked on orchestrating the Rocky Horror Picture Show, his master tapes did not survive, and he recorded it at the radiophonic workshop. And so that's the only reason why that set does not have isolated scores on it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you looking up who it is?
Oh, yeah. I can't find it.
Mind Warp is not a very beloved story, but it came at the right time. Of course, it has
Richard Hartley. Does that sound?
Yeah, Richard Hartley. Yeah, and he had agreed to let me interview him a while back, but I just kind of never got around to it.
Now, what is the name of your podcast? Because now that I've talked to you, I want to listen to this podcast.
So the podcast is Adventures in Time, Space, and Music, and it started as a spin-off from the Who on Who podcast. And so while some people refer to the TARDIS Tavern, which is a Doctor Who and drinking podcast, as being the Torchwood spinoff, I'm probably the K9 and Company spinoff.
Okay.
At least the more family-oriented one. So the way it started was, having certain stories and going through and talking about the music, or the 6 months where they decided we're going to do all 6 key at a time. I'm like, I cannot talk for endless hours about Dudley Simpson for 6 months straight. So I would sit down with each of those stories and think about, what elements about the scores do I want to talk about? And Reboss Operation, it's like, the organ was the most complicated machine devised by the human race up until the telephone exchange. And of course, the organ plays a central role in the Reboss Operation. We'll talk about that. And then I think for Tara, it was the harpsichord. And, as a way to kind of talk about music history, but how it relates to Doctor Who, like Mask of Mandragora.
This sounds like my kind of show, man.
Well, and Mask of Mandragora, which was a family favorite because my older brother and his girlfriend are actually, they joust and Ren fairs and things. Growing up, and it takes place in Renaissance Italy. And it's one of the few times in the show where you actually have period music. The Shakespeare Code has large, sweeping symphonic score, but you think, hey, maybe you have some Elizabethan era music? No, not really. Oh, well, too bad. For people like me, darn it. But you go look at Mask of Mandragora, and it uses period instrument recordings for the scenes when they actually have the mask at the end of the story. And the funny thing is, there's 3 bits of stock.
He has no idea. He's like, what? Mask of what?
It's
a great story arc.
It's the story right before Sarah Jane Smith leaves.
Okay.
And so you have 2 of the 3 pieces are written actually, about 50 years after the story takes place, only one of them is really period. That's okay.
Right.
You know, I mean,
It kinda is like that.
Doctor Who. I mean, you look at a story like The King's Demons, not a very beloved story right before the Five Doctors, but a famous lutenist named Jacob Lindbergh, who performs all across Europe and is especially spent most of his career in England. He played the lute for that story. That's the one where Chameleon's playing the lute,
Right.
posing as the King of England. And you sit there and go, well, okay, there's a moment where you actually see a lute in Doctor Who, which again is then not seen again until the opening pre-credit sequence in the Shakespeare Code. Guy sings a really corny lute song at that point.
Yes.
That's okay. That's okay. I mean, stories are divisive. You look at a story like The Sea Devils, which was Malcolm Clarke's first score for the show, and people either love the electronic music score for The Sea Devils, or they hate it. It's like the Rings of Akaten. People
Right.
either love it or hate it. But the nice thing about Doctor Who is that people take a risk to do things that might, ignite one side of fandom being, this
Sure.
is the best thing ever, or this is the absolute worst thing ever. But the thing is, a show like Doctor Who's been around long enough that you're going to find things that you absolutely love and be like,
And you can weather the storm. And it's
Yeah, you're
everywhere
not going
it's
to
the story.
hate 3 in a row.
Well, no,
Right.
and it's definitely like that with the story. Like you're talking about Rings of Akaten. I know people that absolutely hate that story. That show, I think it's one of the best.
I like
from the
this-
character development of especially Matt Smith and you get the grit of him as the Doctor. I thought so.
He gives a great performance in
Right.
it. That's one where I kind of wish that the translation circuits didn't work, because I'm sure the music would have been a lot better if we would have just had it not in English.
Right.
I mean, it's like in Series 7, the only thing that really bugged the heck out of me, everyone loved Cold War with the
Right.
Ice Warriors,
Ice
right?
Warrior.
Is I really wish in the pre-credit sequence before the TARDIS arrives that everything was in Russian with subtitles.
You wanted to do
TARDIS
Hunt for Red October?
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, but then the TARDIS arrives
Right.
and suddenly speaking English, and you're like, well, of course the TARDIS would do that for us.
Yeah, that would be a really
But
nice
they've never,
production touch,
they've never
too.
done that, and they've only really abused it once when it was Good Man Goes to War, where it didn't happen right away, and it should have. Where they do the thing on the crib, that should have
Right.
been automatic. I mean, it should have been an automatic, but
But it
sorry,
was for
the-
dramatic purposes.
Right.
It's kind of like the sonic screwdriver always works until it doesn't.
right until it's wood or
Right.
It doesn't do wood. It's like no, it doesn't do wood. So
Exactly, for plot expediency,
Sure.
right? And
well, you got to have you can't have it all tied up. Although I mean, we're going to differ because I know there's a lot of people that don't like Moffat. I mean, I think he throws a lot of stuff out there and sees what sticks and then comes around. So sorry.
Speaking of which, now we're going to get back to Moffat. What did you think of the sunglasses this season? Talk about something that divides the fandom.
I like my sonic screwdriver to be a sonic screwdriver. Now, I love the fact that they explain away. Okay, so the original sonic screwdriver with Troughton starts out, it can turn screws, undo locks.
Right.
And then the doctor finally explains, oh, I've added some new apps. Great. It's a wave of the storytelling wand that the magic wand of the show can do more stuff.
Right.
They're okay. I'm not a big fan of the sunglasses, but
Okay. I'm not either. I liked that they tried something, but it went on way too long without our sonic screwdriver. And I don't need the sonic screwdriver to solve every problem, to show up every moment.
But McCoy
But I
and
thought those
Colin
sunglasses
Baker
were
didn't use
stupid.
a sonic screwdriver ever.
Right, but
It was gone, right?
But I would be
Except
okay
the
with
TV
that.
movie-
Except,
the TV
but the
movie-
TV movie
But
it came
I would
back.
be okay with it being gone. I had a harder time with.
But
They
the-
looked like Ray-Bans. He'd
But
go
what's-
like this.
What's
and I'm
the
like,
difference
this
between
is pretty.
them being in glasses or being in that or being in an
See,
iPhone?
it just didn't
doesn't
work for
I mean,
me.
it's the
I
device.
would have
but
rather
it's
he had
still
an
the same.
iPhone.
Next time anyone watches the TV movie, watch the moment that McCoy uses the sonic screwdriver, because they realized after they filmed it that he was holding it backwards.
Right.
And so they kind of fudged the image on screen so it doesn't show it as clearly, because they realized, oops, production mistake.
He's
Yeah,
older.
that's one of those things.
He
though,
was
you know,
drunk. Who knows?
It was a big, because we do a show called Cuckoo for Who with my daughter,
Right.
and that was a big conversation with my wife, my daughter, and I, because none of us liked the sunglasses, and it kept taking us out of it, because he'd hit the thing on the side, and like, oh, it wasn't until the very end that he kind of explained things that made a little bit more sense, and but it was hard. It was a hard sell for us.
But
In a way, it felt like a setup for the only time I thought it was really effective was the moment Clara had them,
Right.
turning on the stand
Exactly.
to watch the
And that was great.
conversation, and you sit there and go, okay, all the rest of it felt like a setup so you can have that one
moment,
fabulous
yeah.
dramatic moment.
That whole
Yeah.
second half of 7, and we've talked about this before, is a lost kind of like half of a series because I don't think they were sure what they were going to do,
Right.
whether she
Where
was
she
going to
was
stay
gonna
on the
stay
show
or
or not.
she was gonna leave.
She quit twice and then came back. Literally
Right.
quit twice and came back, and they had to rewrite all of those stories kind of on the
Right.
fly. It's like, oh, well, she's not going to be here. What are we going to do? Because they had something else written completely where he was just going to travel and pick up like those 4 episodes from David Tennant where they didn't have a series and he did all the specials. We're just going to pick something up, and we're just going to go with a little bit of a story. And then all of a sudden, oh, Clara's back, and she did that twice.
Right.
She was gone twice.
Right.
Right. Well, and it's you think about how successful the 50th is, and like really until a few days before they started filming,
They didn't have
it was going to be Eccleston, but he wrote himself into a corner. I cannot write any further unless I know it's going to be him or
Right.
not. And then it's like, sorry. And so, what an inspired solution to have an incarnation of the Doctor, and then go backwards and then refilm the end of series of the previous
Yeah.
series.
And
Set up John
redo
Hurt.
the name of the Doctor, and so yeah.
Oh yeah, brilliant.
I mean, but I'm surprised that with all the wonderful little extras that they put out on the web, that we couldn't have had at least one gag one where
Yes.
where Hurt had the creature come out of his
Yeah,
chest,
right,
baseball
right,
style.
right.
It's like
See, but I don't know how much he embraces that. As serious of an actor as he is, I don't know if he really. I don't say he. I think he.
do you ever follow his Facebook page?
Does he talk about it?
He puts alien.
Okay,
memes
that's
up
cool. I didn't
all
know.
the
I mean, I
time.
was just speculating because the guy wanted. Did he win or he was nominated for an Oscar from Elephant Man? It's like the dude's legit.
Oh, he
It's
is
not like-
legit,
It's
but-
not like he's
But I think he. I mean, I haven't read his Facebook page, but I've never read anything where he didn't embrace the alien thing.
I didn't know
think
that,
he
so-
enjoys that.
Well, every Easter there will always be all sorts of things about alien eggs and face huggers, and be like, free hugs, and it's like, yeah, we like you.
If you're going to tie yourself on something, it's a decent movie. It's got a little bit of play.
Alien? Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah,
So-
but like he was interviewed on the extras for the War Doctor sets,
Uh-huh.
and you sit there and he's just like he's very laid back about doing it. It's like you could tell he wasn't going to say no to do it. Well, there was a bit of a delay because he was going through cancer treatment for a
Right,
while,
right.
right. And
Well, wasn't
so
that after that or was it during?
It was. I think it was just before they actually recorded, so they were
Right.
kind of on hold until they knew he was okay.
Right.
But it was like when there was a big push from Doctor Who Online. They were interviewing Tom Baker, and it's like, all the Big Finish stuff is great. You should do it. You should do it. And then that somehow opened the door for them to have a conversation. And so I remember it was like right when he signed on, and they actually had scripts developed already, about to go in production when Elizabeth Sladen died.
Right.
And so people have been wondering, it's like, hey, can we have those as potential novels or
Right.
short stories or something?
Sure.
Because Tom Baker, Sarah Jane Smith, actress is gone, first Romana, but we got Romana 2 to come back and do audios.
Right.
Although I think Tom records in Tunbridge, Wales, and Lala records
Yes.
in downtown London.
Sure.
So you don't have to have the awkward post-divorce
No.
stuff. It's just like,
But that's that's been so long. I would almost bet.
Oh, and
Hopefully
they're
they might be
professionals
past it.
too.
But yeah,
I'm sure they can
well,
work.
but they didn't. Well,
they couldn't there.
couldn't
No, but I
stand
mean,
each
at this
other
point,
at the time.
At this point, there are ways around it. But I have a question about the Big Finish audio, and I'm really ignorant on this. I actually have only listened to a little bit. When we're talking about the music, are they using music from the show, or are they doing original scores for these?
original scores for all of them, but when they first started the Big Finish back in 1999, they only used, the classic Baker arrangement of the main tune because they thought, well, everyone, that's the most iconic. That's what
Right.
And so maybe it was about 50 releases in, they started to then, okay, if this is Colin Baker before Trial of a Time Lord, it'll be the Peter Howell version.
Wow, so they are really paying attention
Right. And
to
so
the
then
music.
So if it's post Trial of a Time Lord, which they of course had several of their own companions, they've had to fill that gap. They've even recorded Colin Baker's last story before he bumps his head on the console in Time in the Ronnie, and actually gave it a dramatic thrust because it's a terrible way to write out a doctor. But then, of course, he didn't want to come back because he was fired. So you can't blame an actor for that, right?
Not his fault.
So it's like and Tom Baker's even mentioned that they've recorded so many stories, and it takes like a year production for each story. They have different sound designers and composers. Is that he's even said, it's like, I might be dead in a year or two, but there'll still be Doctor Who stories coming out with the fourth Doctor, which in a way makes up for all those years. Like
That we
think about
didn't have,
you think about
yeah.
the 5 Doctors, You just have a press call with the Waxworks version of that wax statue of Tom Baker in the Series 18 costume. I might.
Yes.
Once again.
Right. It's kind of like, even though as much as Dimensions in Time is absolutely dreadful, it's like he's wearing the Series 18 outfit. That is.
So with those Big Finish audio, do they put out the soundtracks?
They did for many of the early ones. The more recent releases, what they tend to do is they'll do, say, a suite of the music from the story at the end on one of the CDs. They've moved to where they've had you can buy either the CD, which you also get a download version, so that way you don't have to rip it onto your computer yourself.
Right.
And when they put out their 50th anniversary story, which was called Light at the End, which featured amazingly all 8 of the audio doctors, they also had, it's like if you bought the extended box set, you got the box set, you got the download, you got a 5.1 download version.
Ooh, nice.
Wow, nice.
Which is really, really good.
Yeah.
And so.
Wow, excellent.
And someone and a fan, and this was 5 years ago, did a calculation of the numbers of hours of Big Finish Doctor Who. There is more Big Finish Doctor Who than the entirety of the history of the television show.
Really? No, I didn't know that.
Finish.
Wow.
They've been going since 1999.
At what point did they become canon? Because I know that not all of it was canon.
Well, the problem is that the Eccleston story Dalek was a reworking of a Big Finish story by Rob Shearman. I mean, the same author, did both versions, called Jubilee, which was the Sixth Doctor, and Evelyn Smythe, who was a professor of Elizabethan history, my favorite audio companion. But, then other ones you have a very, in the audio sometimes you do get really funny stories. So there's already a Fifth Doctor story called The Kingmaker that has a funny timeline for what happens with William Shakespeare before they put out the Shakespeare Code. So just like in television canon, there's all sorts of things that contradict each other.
Sure.
Between them. But I think it's been the fact that fans would say, well, this is canon, this is not canon. And I think that the BBC had a firm word. It's like, we haven't said that anything's not canon, but they won't say if anything's canon.
So they haven't. I thought they had said
the BBC
what
did,
was.
but Moffat did.
Right,
Moffat did said all them. He definitely said the McGann stuff was because
Right.
he wrote it in as
Yeah,
part
see,
of one of the-
I thought that it was
He wrote it
from
in-
like McGann on were
Well,
canon
no,
or
they
something.
they were talking about the timeline as McGann on, but anything they recorded after was enveloped in that.
Yeah.
But it's weird because Moffat said, but the BBC never officially said it. But
Interesting.
Moffat writes like it's canon.
Right.
Because he brought in that Night of the Doctor where he brings it in, so once it's on video, it kind of makes it
and he explained that
legitimizes
it's like written for the box set generation. It's like, well, we don't have a regeneration of McGann. We need a regeneration of McGann,
Right.
and we got it. And in fact, if you think about it, like that 6 minutes is probably the 6 minutes of televised, streamed McGann Doctor, even though the TV movie is great. But you have so many, think about it. McGann has been doing the Eighth Doctor on audio since like the year 2000.
Right.
So he's, for him, it's like everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing he's back in the role. It's like, well, he's been doing the role for 15 years. It's just that.
Yeah, it just wasn't on video. Well, they say, isn't he the most prolific Doctor? Hasn't he done the most when you count the Big Finish audio?
I think so. For a long time, because of the novels with the New Adventures, it was the Seventh Doctor.
Right.
But it's just.
Yeah, when you get into the novals, that's a whole other animal.
Right.
The soundtracks are terrible on those, by the way.
On the novels? Yes.
A lot of crinkling paper.
Boring.
It's really,
I
yeah.
have a lot of trouble turning the volume up high enough,
You turn it up to 11. and
Those are
it works
soundtracks by
fine.
John Cage. Interesting.
Right.
Oh, wait.
I'm
We
glad
use
that-
different
Cage
paper.
joke for you. Come on.
Okay, well, hold on. Since okay. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
John Cage.
John Cage who? Yeah, okay. No, wait. That goes on, what, 2 minutes, 46 seconds?
4
Isn't
minutes
that?
and 33 seconds.
4 minutes and 33 seconds.
And so every now and then on Facebook, if I'm awake at either 4:33 in the afternoon or in the morning, it'll be like 4:33 at 4:33.
Did you ever see somebody? I had this in a indie comics anthology. Somebody did a John Cage comic strip. You need to seek this out. They did it in the style of the Peanuts, and it's amazing.
If you ever get a chance to listen to any of his lectures about music, the thing that's great is he sounds just like Vincent Price.
Oh,
It's like I could listen to it forever. Like yesterday was.
I'm so gonna look this up tonight when I get home.
Another geeky thing to look up is is Stravinsky wrote a piece after the end of the First World War called The Soldier's Tale for double bass, violin, clarinet, bassoon, trumpet, trombone, percussion, and actors. And there's a great performance of it with all the parts narrated by Christopher Lee.
Oh, shut up!
So
That's got to be
He's
great.
fantastic.
Whenever you see a meme of everything that's cool about Christopher Lee, it should always be addended.
And Satan.
That's awesome.
Didn't he play with like Metallica or something?
No,
I mean,
he for a number of years he put out
metal albums.
he put it in a metal.
but
Yeah,
specifically metal Christmas
Yes.
albums.
right.
Yes.
He's like the guy's bleeping insane. He's awesome.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I mean,
Well, and wasn't he nominated for a Grammy or something a couple years ago for that?
I do not
Under the metal
know.
category. I think he was. It was like this weird thing. I remember reading, like he was nominated, maybe it wasn't a Grammy, maybe it was the British one or something, but it was one of his last
Yeah.
Christmas metal album was
Right.
nominated. And people
that's
were like,
crazy.
this is nuts.
And it's
Yeah, he's
such
an
a-
interesting
it's
guy.
such a missed opportunity to not have one of his albums called Saruman Sings, right?
It
Him
is.
and William Shatner doing. No, I'm just teasing. So, well, I mean, not to geek out and go on another thing, but when they were filming Lord of the Rings and they made the sound like when he gets stabbed, he goes. They were doing it, and the guy, whoever was setting up the thing, he goes, "That's not what happens." The guy's like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "No, I stabbed people in World War II. That's not what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's not what I heard.
That's not what it sounds like. Nor is it like what happens." And the guy's like, "Huh?" And he goes, "No, you've never stabbed somebody. This
Right,
is what
because Peter
happens."
Jackson talks about it on the
Right.
extras.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like, what the dude? Like, what are you doing? So,
Another Doctor connection to Lord of the Rings is: would you believe that Tom Baker was up for playing the role of Gandalf in those films?
oh yeah, I bet.
Was he really?
Yeah, he has a son from one of his marriages in New Zealand, but he turned it down because he did not feel he was up for the travel.
Oh, I'm
back
sure.
and forth from the UK. But
Could have been an interesting tie-in, though. Ian McKellen's a tough one to beat, but Tom Baker would have been interesting.
Well, he was in
Right.
the Dungeons and Dragons movie, right? Was that what it was? He was
Yeah,
an elf.
okay, yeah,
he was like, it was a very.
That's a bit of a step down
Well,
from
but I'm
Lord of
just
the
saying, but
Rings.
he-
I dragged family to see that.
Yeah, sorry.
And that was the 5 minutes that was sublimely amazing in the middle of a really terrible
Oh
movie.
yeah,
Right.
there were like 3 good things about that. When they did the time portal thing was good. The whole the
Right.
dimension door was fantastic. The rest of it sucked. Then Tom Baker, you're like, oh, this is great. So
Couldn't that be said in most movies? If you put Tom Baker in the middle, all of a sudden it elevates it?
yes,
Well, like he got the role as the Doctor because of being in the 7th, was it the Golden Voyage of Sinbad?
Yeah, yeah.
And so he's out of work working on a building site, and he writes the guy at BBC, I'm like, I need work. And then the head of the drama goes to Barry Letts going, I think I might have found someone you might not have looked at for the Doctor. And
Yeah.
so he had to keep his mouth quiet about it, when he got the role, and then it was all over the newspapers. And so then he took out all of the people on his work site, building site, for drinks when
Nice.
when it was all official, which is really
Nice.
cool.
that's pretty funny. So,
Well-
and, Tom liked to tilt back a beverage
A little bit, yeah.
Yes.
Is he English? I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah. Well, not
So-
even that. He's an English actor, and
Right.
from the '70s. So it's like,
So I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
But you were fantastic.
Yes.
I would love to have you on again. We do Doctor Who themed nights, and when we do one, I want to have you back.
Great, and if you ever want to do something on the music of like The Empire Strikes Back, I'm totally down.
Okay, then I got 2 things I'm going to say right here while we're talking. First of all, if you wanted a podcast, you got one. You can start up your podcast again under our banner. It's all yours, whatever you want to do. But number 2, we have a show called Next Stop Everywhere, which is all Doctor Who, and they have gained a lot of ground out there. They would love to have you on.
I'd be very happy.
So I will put you in
wait,
touch with,
you need to qualify. No, I'm teasing.
Charles and Jesse. Yes, right. Charles and
Charles
Jesse
and
would love to have
Jesse,
you.
yes, they would.
But if you want to talk about the music of Empire Strikes Back, we also have one called Radio Free Endor.
Right.
And they would love to talk to you too. Jamie is nuts. You would love this guy. And they did at the beginning of their show. So we had this show called Radio Free Endor where they just talked about Star Wars.
Which is a great name for a podcast. by the
Thank
way.
you. I created that. And
put
the
your hand
logo
out.
is way better now.
Chihuahua.
I didn't create that.
Did you write the Ewok song? Because if you did, I'm going to kill you.
Yep, nope.
Just want to let you know. Yes.
Yep, nope. But
You bastard. Sorry.
they had me come on, the new hosts. They'd put out like 2 episodes, and they did this little thing at the beginning where they did like a little radio play thing, and it was amusing. And I was like, oh, they're doing something different here. I wonder what they're doing. Then they invited me on, and I had to play like the Emperor because, Rob is here. Yes. and like I come in and like, Jedi. They put a thing where it sounds like I'm like breathing through the thing, and I'm like, oh, gosh, I couldn't breathe in that thing. Yeah. But they did full production. It was fantastic. They had droids and noises. And I'm like, this is great. So they're actually working on a Christmas special. So if you want to be involved.
You mean not a holiday special?
No, but you know what? I was just talking to a friend of mine
Is Chewbacca going to be with his family?
About doing the holiday special. Reworking it as a live stage show, but reworking it because it would never work. It's horrible.
It's awful.
But how funny would it be to call it the Star Wars Holiday Special? Go ahead and get sued, and create it so that it's almost like a parody version of it, and you'd have to take out that Leslie Uggams part.
So would it be real? Would it be
Oh,
legit instead of bad?
Oh yeah.
Awful.
Oh yeah.
Hey.
So on that 6-disc set of Star Wars, if the only part of the holiday special that's hidden in the extras is the animated Nelvana cartoon. They released that.
Oh,
on that
really?
box set.
I didn't know that.
So all the terrible parts of the holiday special are missing.
Which is everything.
In the
Except for
1 through 6?
That
the
little
box set?
animated.
Oh, really?
The
I didn't know
animated
that.
segment's fantastic.
Yeah, so that's what's on that disc. I think it's on Return of the Jedi.
So I was listening to League of Geeks this week, which Lil that was here, I don't know if you saw Lil, but he has a show called League of Geeks, and they collect a lot of toys and they do stuff. Sean is an artist. He's one of the guys on there. He just bought one of those white Boba Fett figures.
Yeah.
And he's got a couple of them, and he said, I'm customizing it to be the Boba Fett from the cartoon, from the holiday special.
Oh, wow.
He's like, it's going to...
Oh, but that's right, because that's the concept art version.
Yes.
Right.
So they've got the white one, which is the prototype of Boba Fett, but he's painting it very specifically to be the animated special one. I'm like, I want that.
So is Williams going to do the score for 8 or not?
He said he is.
Well, he said he wants to. That's what I read. I didn't know if
my
he was doing
dad
it.
is a huge John Williams fan.
Well, he's
I remember
fantastic.
forever he was working on writing out the 1942 or 1941. Remember?
1942.
You kept working on the
My-
19.
Is that the sequel?
Yeah.
It's a sequel.
19
My twin brother, his favorite score by John Williams is 1941. So
Yeah, he loved it.
thumbs way up. At some point, this summer, because one of the instruments I play is called the viola da gamba. It's like a bowed guitar that was popular from the Renaissance.
She was
So
great
the-
on American Idol.
But
Wah.
But so unlike violin family instruments, the instrument's tuned in fourths.
Yes.
So I have an arrangement I made of Star Wars, all chordal and crazy, and it's called "The Fourths Awaken."
Nice. You're terrible.
You should be podcasting on this network.
Yes, you should. And when we close off this, I have something else to talk to you about. So, all right, let's end it.
Yeah, let's
that
end
was
it.
great,
That
Philip.
was.
You were fantastic. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for
Thank
being
you.
on.
Awesome,
thank you for
thank you.
sharing.
And
Sorry
thank you
to-
my
sorry
wife and-
to it, yes.
And thank you to my wife and daughter for this wonderful
And your
Father's
daughter
Day surprise.
tolerated it. Yay!
Yes. Yeah.
I bet she wishes my daughter was here. They would have had something to do.
She's been watching all the Doctor Who stuff. I'm really excited.
Nothing wrong with
That's
that.
good.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Blue
Thank you.
Box. Thank you, boys. Thank you, Edward. That's it. And happy Father's Day. Thank you.